I'd like to give the floor to Philip Amon. Oh, and he particularly enjoys difficult questions, so you know what to do with Slido.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. It's good that the performance appraisal is coming up, so that'll be a good opportunity to discuss that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I can use that as an excuse, and no pressure, you know. But I'll do my best to give you a flavor of our key flagship product, the Internet Crime Threat Assessment Report. Now, before I start, I want to say hello to the viewers on YouTube, but I also like to use this opportunity to thank everyone in the room, because while this is our main product, this is the main EC3 flagship assessment, it's the key Europol product when it comes to the cybercrime landscape in the EU. In a way, this is your product, because a lot of you have actually contributed to that. That's law enforcement colleagues, that's industry, that's academia. And you know what? Without your input, we wouldn't be able to deliver the document in the current quality. So thank you for that. This is our product, if you will. And you see that on the slide. It's quite unique because it's a law enforcement specific view on the cybercrime landscape. It describes what we see from a law enforcement perspective, and that is complemented with input from industry, from academia. So it's a very holistic product. I would like to, thank actually Nicole, because I mean, the only reason I'm presenting this product, that's the truth, is that we couldn't afford the double fee for her, because this is really her team. Has done a tremendous job. It's Gary, our EC3 satellite, I don't know if he's in the room, really done a great work to put this together. I'd like to thank my colleagues also in operations, Fernando's teams, digital forensics colleagues in other units. This is really all the expertise, everything that we see coming together in that product. So it's cyber specific. It looks at back the last 12 months, what were the key challenges, the key threats, the key developments, also some of those successes. So I'll be happy to report on that as well. But equally, we try to predict the future, which is hard enough, especially when it comes to cyber. And you know, frequently we'll be wrong, but hopefully we'll have some good guesses there. But we're not just highlighting the threats and challenges. We've also included some key recommendations. And the idea there is that we can help law enforcement colleagues in the member states to help them prioritize their activities, help them prioritize their resources, focus on the joint key high-value targets that we want to target. So this is, for us, a key document also to bring together those key recommendations for law enforcement, but equally, we aim to support the discussion processes at the EU as well. So many different functions that we try to deliver through that document. What are we covering? Almost all the buzzwords. Look at this. Ransomware, 5G, dark web, everything is there. I think there are two missing, so that's definitely quantum computing, artificial intelligence perhaps, and blockchain. But you know, don't worry, I'll cover those in my presentation to make sure that we've covered all the relevant buzzwords. Now I'm joking here, of course, but the point is we have a very law enforcement specific on those views. And for instance, when it comes to quantum computing, we need to look at that. And what we usually do with our iOCTA is we try to cut through the bus and say, what is it? Why do we need to, for instance, already talk about quantum computing or quantum encryption? So what has changed? Well, first of all, so the left screenshot, that's the last year's report. If you look at it, we've become more inclusive, because we realized it's not just the guy in the hoodie who commits cybercrime, but it's anyone with a criminal mind. So I think that clearly shows the new cover is more expanding, taking into account that we have many different actors in that space. We also look at artificial intelligence. And I'm saying this because obviously we got a lot of, people making fun of us because of the cover with the hoodie. But so that's just a side remark. But all joking aside, so what are the key threats and trends? And no real surprises there. And it's actually what the previous speaker said. You'll see a lot of repetition or replication or confirmation, I should say, of that. Unfortunately, ransomware attacks, that's a successful criminal business model. So this continues to be a key threat. And what we see there is more targeted attacks. So no longer just individuals or randomly organizations. This is now targeted against big organizations, against hospitals, against the critical infrastructure. So a bigger economic damage, a bigger economic impact, but when it comes to critical infrastructure, there's a huge cyber risk that comes with that as well. When it comes to business email compromise, we heard that before. Key challenge that we see as well. We use the more general term payment process compromise. So this is also evolving fast. They're adapting. Criminals are adapting to new security measures. They're using social engineering because, unfortunately, we still are the weakest link as human beings. It's still sometimes quite easy to hack, or easier to hack the human operating system than to go through, hack through the technical security measures. But we do see an increase in the technical cyber component of these attacks as well, whether it's malware, whether it's other forms of technical measures to have a successful intrusion, to the point where they use technology also to improve the social engineering part. In the area of child sexual abuse, unfortunately, constantly increasing volume of child sexual abuse material. This is exacerbated also by self-generated explicit material by youngsters, but this is a huge volume challenge for law enforcement. There's a huge wave of material coming our way, and that's an increasing serious challenge for law enforcement to investigate this type of criminality on the web. In the area of dark markets, what we see there is a move to distributed marketplaces. The whole environment is more volatile, and I think it's fair to say that we are partially responsible for that. But I wouldn't see this as a negative thing. It's a positive thing because of, and you'll see that in a minute, of some of the operations that we've supported, successful operations that we've supported in that space. The whole environment is in flux. There's a high level of distrust now. So criminals in that space trying to find new ways to do their business in the dark web. And then in the area of crime as a service, so all these services and tools that actually provide the means for people to commit cybercrime. If we look specifically at DDoS attacks, what we see there is, again, DDoS attacks being increasingly used for extortion purposes. Now we have two, if you will, cross-cutting, not changes, but developments. And again, the previous speakers alluded to that as well. What we see is an increasing abuse of encryption, an increasing abuse, criminal abuse of anonymity services and cryptocurrencies. And of course, the problem there is for law enforcement, that's this, that challenge, that how do we balance that? We want to have strong encryption, we support privacy, but at the same time, we want to be able to investigate criminal activity online that are abusing those services. And why is that the case? Because a lot of communication platforms, social media platforms have now end-to-end encryption, for instance, installed or activated by default. The other key point is data as a key element. Now, that hasn't really changed. It's just becoming even more and more important. So for criminals, it's a commodity, it's a target. But when we look at some of the cybersecurity measures, for instance, if you think about AI-based cybersecurity measures that are being put in place, criminals are now using data to bypass those measures. For law enforcement, the key challenge is how do we access the relevant data in the context of a criminal investigation? And that, of course, is linked to the previous point. How do we deal with the criminal abuse of encryption? How do we deal with the criminal abuse of networks, anonymity layer networks like Tor or cryptocurrencies? How do we deal with all the legal challenges? And that in its entirety creates this perfect storm, quote unquote, for law enforcement, where it becomes increasingly difficult to access the relevant data, the relevant evidence in the context of investigations. So some of the other key threats and trends, and obviously you'll have access to the documents. I won't go into great detail, but those are sort of the key 5 main areas. If you look at cyber-dependent crime, we see phishing as one of the key target vectors. So again, with a social engineering component, but also the abuse or the use of remote desktop protocols. When it comes to payment fraud, card not present fraud, still the key challenge there, the key threat there, but also skimming. And again, what we see with skimming is that criminals are evolving. One of the reasons for that is that we are increasing on the other side, if you will, increases the security measures, and criminals react to that. So that's usually what we see. Where we think the criminals are very sophisticated, but typically they would only innovate if they have to. And having increased security measures is one of these triggers that leads to that. And then checkpotting, so against the logical attacks against ATMs, what we've seen there is that the malware to do that, which in the past used to be the OCGs or the groups behind it used to be quite protective. This is now broader available, which means there's a wider accessibility of these malwares and a high level of success as well. In the area of dark web, as I mentioned before, there's a move to distributed marketplaces. What we also see is single vendor markets popping up, and what we also see is vendors distributing the business across different markets. So there's a high degree of decentralization, which of course will create new challenges for investigators. In the area of CSE, in addition to what I mentioned, already mentioned, what we see is that online grooming remains a key threat. And also, while commercial child sexual abuse online is relatively small compared to the non-commercial part, there is a particular problem when it comes to life distance child abuse. So this is basically perpetrator paying for the life abuse of children. Now, as I said in my introduction, I don't want to be too bleak. What you'll find in the document is a lot of successes, a lot of operations that we've supported with law enforcement partners, with industry, with academia, coming together to have successes in that space. And that's really, as we heard, I think Amy said that as well. You know, I would definitely also refer to that as the gold standard. If we have an investigation, if you can go after the criminals, if you can disrupt the business, if you can bring them to justice, that has the most lasting impact. And one of the examples in the area of the dark web is a very successful operations that we've supported with took down 2 of the major marketplaces, one of the major Bitcoin mixers, and a website called deep.web, which in essence was the telephone book of the dark web. And that together with the prevention and awareness campaigns created what I referred to previously, this high level of distrust. So there's a huge flux now in that space. And of course, as I said, criminals will now innovate and we need to react to that, but definitely a huge success. Speaking about DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, those booters and stressors where you can actually hire and buy those, purchase those services, we supported Operation Power Off, which last year targeted one of the key services providing that service. So more than 150,000 users, took you about $15 to be part of that. So without any technical knowledge, you pay $15 and you can launch massive DDoS attacks against any kind of target. We had a follow-up activity operation supported at the beginning of this year to actually go after the most prolific users as well. So this idea, it's not just the providers, but also the users that we need to look at. And then as a third example in the area of child sexual abuse online, so this is a 2019 NECMEC referral identifying a suspect in an EU member state. That person, the perpetrator, was using more than 40 different profiles to groom children online, and he used encrypted messaging services to actually arrange for the rape of children. This is still an ongoing investigation. So coming now to the key recommendations. As I said, what we try to do there is, those are the problems. We have different ways and means to respond to that. Ideally, an investigation, but I would almost argue that, you know, gold standard investigation, but the platinum standard actually preventing a crime from happening in the first place. So again, having this holistic approach. When it comes to the dark web, since this is an international phenomenon, you can't solve it. Classic example. I mean, that probably goes for cybercrime in general, but you can't solve this at a national level. So what we've been working on, there's a dedicated team now under Fernando's leadership, looking at an international strategy. How can we deconflict the coordination, you know, to avoid things like blue on blue action? Because at any given point in time, you can be sure that national law enforcement colleagues are active in those marketplaces, and you want to ensure that you don't disrupt any ongoing investigations. So having a coordinated strategy, a holistic approach to disrupt the illicit activity on dark web is key. I mentioned before with the example of Power Off, we need to continue to target those major crime services, because again, if we take out those crime services that are being used by criminals to commit other crimes, we have a major impact. Same goes for the child safety online. I mean, this idea that we would like to have a center, an EU center, looking at child safety online. And this requires working with all the relevant stakeholders, with law enforcement, with NGOs, with all the partners that we need to liaise with, to have a complete picture, to coordinate actions, to have, as I said, a holistic approach, not just investigations, but also prevention, awareness, education, which brings me to the next point. This idea that, you know, we teach our children how to survive in the real world. I don't think we do the same when it comes to cyberspace. So we need to continue focusing on that. And we've had the first Youth Day organized with students here from The Hague to get their input, to provide feedback, to see what the issues are and how we can work together to increase cyber education, awareness of the risks, and how you can be safe online, but also to increase cyber resilience. Now, the last 2 points is quite interesting. So I was reading a very provocative statement the other day, and it said, you know, information sharing and public-private partnerships are the thoughts and prayers of the cybersecurity community. It's very provocative, but there's a truth to that, in the sense that I'm pretty sure you've been to, 10 years ago to conferences, and what was the recommendation? We need to share more information. We need to work together. We need to have public-private partnerships. And that's linked to the last point, innovation. Now, for us, the point is, and I think it's fair to say, Europol and EC3 has implemented, we're walking the walk. We've implemented a working and successful public-private partnership model. We have information sharing built into our organization, built into our legal framework. We have, if you think about it, we have more than 40 states here that have seconded, I think it's in total more than 250 liaison officers from the 28 member states and a number of non-EU partners with whom we have operational agreements. We have advisory groups, EC3, we have 3 advisory groups with 70 experts from different areas. We have an academic advisory network. So we have all these networks. We have a program board with Interpol, with CEPOL, with the Commission, with the Council, most recently also with the European Defence Agency. So we have those networks and we're trying to walk the walk. I think what we need to do is, and I'm linking this also to what the executive director said, we need to probably take this to the next level, to see how can we make this even more effective. What are the obstacles to sharing information? How can we improve that? What are the incentives to share information? What are the incentives to work together? And that's linked to the innovation, this idea that we need to look at the requirements of law enforcement, and we need to see how can we turn that into research and development. How can we be more innovative, more agile to respond to the criminals? We'll probably never be as agile because they don't have any obstacles and no legal limitations, but we need to aim to be almost as agile as they are. Now, I'll give you a few examples of which I would not call the platinum standard, which is the No More Ransom initiative. Now, this is something that started, well, fairly small, but the idea was to have something probably just focusing on the EU, having a one-stop shop to access tools that are available and have prevention awareness as well. Now, this is now a major platform with more than 150 partners. And again, many of you actually already supporting that. Available in 36 different languages, more than 80 tools are available through that platform. And if you look at the statistics, it's been around now for about a little bit more than 3 years. We know for sure that more than around 200,000 victims have been able to decrypt their data. Now, this is a very conservative estimate because most tools don't collect statistics. But if you just take those 200,000, that's more than 100 million that we were able to prevent from going to criminals and potentially financing other types of crimes. So my plea to you is, and look at this, when we set up this website, and one does not simply set up a website. What I mean with that is that there's almost a PR issue in the sense that we've seen with some ransomware families, victims in the hundreds of thousands, but just tens of thousands of people coming to the website using those tools. So we need to spread the word. And for those of you who are not members yet, we invite you to become a supporting member of the platform, to promote what we have here, and to continue with the platform and extend it. The second example I want to give you is the Trace and Object initiative. So this is now in the area of child sexual abuse and victim identification, where again the colleague said, well, we have these cases where we hit a wall as investigators. We can't even geolocate the picture. We can't even geolocate the video. So what they came up with is the Trace and Object initiative, which takes certain elements of that picture, obviously not showing the victim, and we put that online. We've published more than 180 pictures. We've received more than 24,000 tips. And you know what? We've been able to save 9 children and go after 2 offenders. Now, again, those kids we probably would have not been able to save without your support. So again, now this goes to everyone, because everyone can help us. Everyone can become an investigator. If you have some time, take it out of your busy day. Please look at those pictures, and perhaps you can help us with some tips. And this is just an example of, we put it on Twitter, and then immediately you have a response. That's a hotel room in Mauritius. And then we can even, through special other, elements in the picture, we were able to identify the number, the room, the hotel room number as well. Which then means we know who to talk to, and we've geolocated at least the picture. So this is hugely successful. And again, thank you very much for those of you who have supported this, and also an invitation to, if you have some time, please do go to our website and look at these pictures. So what are the future threats and developments? Is this the 20 minutes or the 5 minutes as well?
You're already in overtime.
Oh, yeah. Okay, So we'll continue with the ransomware attacks. That, unfortunately, as a business model, will continue. We'll see more specialized crime as service providers. Again, not just sort of in the open space, but also in the criminal market. You see criminals specializing in certain areas. The fact how, this is also linked to the business email compromise problem, the way companies do business. So you outsource part of your operations. You have segregated processes. So we'll see increased attacks against the supply chain, which also means that you have to have a holistic cybersecurity approach. Phishing, again, social engineering will remain a primary attack vector. We'll see new payment systems will be abused, for instance, also linked to the BSD2, the Payments System Directive 2. We'll potentially see some issues there. And there's increasing impact of deepfake technology. So quick question, do you know what Moore's Law stands for? Probably most of you know that. Yeah. Have you heard of Nevin's Law? So Hartmut Nevin is a German researcher. He's the head of the Google Quantum Artificial Intelligence Center. So this probably person knows a thing or two about artificial intelligence. And what we see in that space, and he basically says, Moore said, well, overall computing power will increase will double every second year. Nevin says, quantum computing power will double, not double, it will double exponentially growth every year. So if that's true, we really need to watch that space. And we already see that when it comes to deepfake technology, a huge increase in the quality. And for instance, one of the areas where we're quite concerned is the CSE area, where people might, create those images according to their flavor, so to speak. Now, again, I have to use Lord of the Rings, and this echoes what we heard from the previous speakers. We cannot fight cybercrime alone. As we heard from the ED, we need to work together. We need to become more audacious, just like the criminals. We need to have better cooperation. And with that, I think I'll thank you, and I believe that our conference will actually be a great opportunity to discuss many of these challenges that we've identified. Thank you.
It's okay, Philip.